California killing spree that's captivated the world for decades. Now a group of sleuths claims to have solved the case of the infamous Zodiac Killer.
On August 1st, 1969, 3 newspapers in San Francisco received identical letters in the mail. Each letter contained a detailed confession to a series of murders. Each letter contained a threat to kill again, and to keep killing until the police caught him. And each letter contained 1/3 of a strange coded cipher that the writer demanded be printed on the front page of the newspaper. He signed every letter the same way: the symbol of a gun sight, the symbol of a predator lining up his target. He called himself the Zodiac. Over the next several years, the Zodiac sent over 20 letters to newspapers and police departments across California. He described his murders in precise, chilling detail. He mocked detectives by name. He threatened to blow up school buses full of children. He claimed to have killed 37 people. The police never caught him. His identity has never been confirmed, and one of his coded messages went unsolved for over 50 years. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer, the most taunting, most theatrical, and most terrifying serial killer in American history. Section 1. The first attack. We need to go back to December 20th, 1968, a Friday night just before Christmas. The location, a remote lover's lane called Lake Herman Road, just outside the town of Berryessa, California.
They think that he was a man living in Tuolumne County the whole time who died just 3 years ago. Reporter Renee Santos on who they now believe was responsible for the Zodiac killings.
David Faraday was 17 years old. He was on his very first date with 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen. They drove out to Lake Herman Road, parked their car, and sat together in the quiet dark the way teenagers do. They had no reason to be afraid. This was a well-known, relatively safe spot. Other couples parked there regularly. Sometime around 11 o'clock at night, someone walked up to their car, shot David in the head at close range, and then chased Betty Lou as she ran from the car. He shot her 5 times in the back. She died in the road, just 30 feet from the car. There were no witnesses. There was no clear motive. Nothing was stolen. There was no sexual assault. David and Betty Lou had no enemies. Police were baffled. This appeared to be a random, cold, calculated execution of 2 completely innocent teenagers. The case went cold almost immediately.
Yeah, this group also connects the Zodiac Killer to a 55-year-old murder out of Riverside, California. And we just got off the phone with Riverside police who tell us there isn't a connection.
Then, 6 months later, it happened again. July 4th, 1969, Independence Day. Darlene Farron, age 22, and Michael Mageau, 19, were parked at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California, just a few miles from the first crime scene. Shortly after midnight, a car pulled up beside them. A man got out, shone a bright flashlight into their faces, and opened fire without a single word. Darlene died at the scene. Michael, despite being shot multiple times, survived by pretending to be dead. Less than an hour after the shooting, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. The caller was calm. His voice was flat, almost bored. He said, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year." He gave the location precisely. He gave the weapon precisely. He referenced the December murders. And then he hung up. The police traced the call to a phone booth just a few blocks from the Vallejo Police Department itself. He had called from directly outside the police station. It was his first act of deliberate provocation. It would not be his last. Section 2. The letters begin. Those 3 letters arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald on August 1st, 1969. Each letter described the murders in details that had never been released to the public, details that only the killer could have known. The letters were not the ramblings of a disturbed person seeking attention. They were precise. They were organized. They were written by someone who was intelligent, methodical, and utterly without remorse. The writer gave the newspapers an ultimatum: print the ciphers on the front page, or he would go on a killing rampage, targeting dozens of people over the coming weekend. The newspapers debated. Police debated. Ultimately, they complied. All 3 ciphers were printed. The public was asked to help decode them. Within a week, a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty cracked the first and largest of the 3 ciphers. The decoded message read, in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." He ended the message by saying he would not give his name because it would slow down the collection of slaves for his afterlife. He believed, apparently, that everyone he killed would serve him as a slave after death. 2 of the 3 ciphers from that first batch were solved. The third, a short 18-character cipher, was not solved for over 51 years. It remained one of the most famous unsolved codes in American history until a team of amateur code breakers finally cracked it in December 2020. Its message: "I hope you are having lots of fun and trying to catch me." He was playing a game, and he wanted everyone to know it. Section 3, Lake Berryessa, the most violent attack. On September 27, 1969, 2 college students, Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were picnicking on the shores of Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California. It was a warm, peaceful Saturday afternoon. A figure appeared at the edge of the trees. He was wearing a black executioner-style hood over his head, a square hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes. On his chest, sewn in white fabric, was a circle with a cross through it, the Zodiac symbol. He was carrying a gun and a length of rope. The man told Brian and Cecilia in a completely calm voice that he was an escaped convict and that he needed their car and money to drive to Mexico. He told Brian to tie up Cecilia with the rope. Then he tied Brian himself. He said, "I'm going to have to stab you people." Brian asked why. The man said, "I need to have experience with killing." He stabbed Cecilia 12 times. He stabbed Brian 6 times. Then he calmly walked to their car, took out a felt-tip pen, and wrote on the car door the dates of all 3 of his previous attacks and the words "by knife" next to today's date. He left them there and walked away. Brian survived. Cecilia died 2 days later in the hospital. Before she died, she was able to describe the attacker to investigators: hood, dark clothing, medium build, calm demeanor, but no face. He had made absolutely sure of that. A fisherman found the 2 victims and called for help. A police officer named Ray Land was among the first responders. As he drove to the hospital, his radio crackled with a report. A payphone call had just come in to the Napa County Sheriff's Office. A man had said, "I want to report a murder." No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. He gave the location. He gave the car. He said, "I am the one who did it." The call was traced to a phone booth in downtown Napa, just 1 block from the police station. Again, he had called from directly outside the police station. Again, this was not coincidence. This was contempt. Section 4, the Stein murder and the letter that should have ended everything. 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, the Zodiac struck for the last confirmed time. Paul Stein was a 29-year-old cab driver and graduate student in San Francisco. He picked up a fare in Union Square just after 9 o'clock at night. The passenger directed him to a residential neighborhood called Presidio Heights. When the cab stopped, the passenger shot Paul Stein once in the head with a .22 caliber pistol. He then wiped down the cab with a cloth, took Paul's wallet, and tore off a piece of Paul's shirt. He walked away into the night, 3 teenagers in a house nearby witnessed the killing and called 911. Police arrived within minutes. An officer broadcast a description: a white male, early 40s, heavy build, wearing glasses and dark clothing, walking north. 2 officers, Donald Fook and Eric Zelms, were patrolling the area. They spotted a man matching the description walking calmly on the sidewalk. They slowed down beside him. He spoke to them through the patrol car window. They drove on. They had received a radio update in the moment, slightly misdescribing the suspect as a black male. They thought this man did not match the updated description. They let him walk away. They had spoken directly to the Zodiac Killer, and they had let him go. Days later, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside was a piece of Paul Stein's blood-soaked shirt as proof, and the letter began: "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire plus then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." The city of San Francisco descended into genuine panic. School bus routes were changed. Armed guards were placed on buses. Hundreds of officers were assigned to the case. The Zodiac had managed to terrorize an entire major American city. Section 5. The Investigation and Prime Suspects. The Zodiac investigation became one of the largest in California history. Hundreds of thousands of tips poured in. The case was worked by multiple police departments: Vallejo, Napa, San Francisco, who frustratingly did not always share information with each other. This lack of coordination cost valuable time and possibly lives. Over the decades, investigators and amateur sleuths have focused on several primary suspects. Arthur Leigh Allen was, for many years, the single most compelling suspect. He was a convicted child molester with a history of violent behavior. He owned a Zodiac brand watch, the same brand and model whose symbol matches the killer's circle and cross logo. People who knew him reported that in the summer of 1969, Allen told them he had fantasized about hunting human beings and calling himself the Zodiac. A handwriting expert found similarities between Allen's handwriting and the Zodiac letters. His home was searched multiple times. He was interviewed multiple times. But DNA samples and fingerprints taken from the Zodiac letters did not match Allen. He died in 1992, never charged. Richard Gaikowski was a journalist and filmmaker. A man named Dennis Kaufman claimed that his stepfather Gaikowski was the Zodiac. Based on home videos and audio recordings he said showed disturbing similarities. A voice expert compared recordings of Gaikowski to a 1969 phone call attributed to the Zodiac and found a potential match. Gaikowski died in 2004. His DNA has never been conclusively tested. In 2021, a team called the Case Breakers, 40 former law enforcement officials, journalists, and military intelligence experts, publicly announced that they believed the Zodiac was a man named Gary Francis Poste, a deceased Air Force veteran and house painter. They cited physical similarities, behavioral evidence, and a claim that an anagram of the Zodiac's final coded message contains Poste's full name. The FBI has not officially endorsed this identification. As of today, the Zodiac Killer case remains officially open and unsolved. Section 6. The letters stop. The mystery remains. After the flurry of activity in 1969, the Zodiac's letters became less frequent. The last letter, widely accepted as authentic, arrived in 1974. In it, he praised the film The Exorcist as the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen, and complained that no one was paying him enough attention anymore. He claimed in his letters to have killed 37 people. Police have officially confirmed 5 murders and 2 non-fatal attacks. The gap between his claimed count and the confirmed count has fueled decades of speculation. Were there more victims whose cases were never connected, or was he simply lying to inflate his legend? The victims and their families have never received justice. David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, Paul Stein, real people with real lives, real futures, real families who were robbed of everything by a man who thought killing was a game. Michael Mageau, who survived the Blue Rock Springs attack, spent decades struggling with the physical and psychological aftermath. In 2009, 40 years later, he finally identified Arthur Leigh Allen as the man who shot him from a photo lineup. Allen, of course, was already dead, and DNA evidence had seemingly cleared him. The contradictions in this case are everywhere you look. The man who was the Zodiac Killer lived a life after these murders. He had neighbors. He may have had a family. He went to the grocery store and watched the news and read the papers with his own name in the headlines. He sat with his secret until the day he died, because statistically, a killer who evaded capture this long almost certainly did not spend the rest of his life in prison. He died a free man, and somewhere in the world, there may be people who knew him and never knew what he was. The Zodiac Killer was not just a murderer. He was a performer. He wrote to newspapers because he wanted an audience. He called from outside police stations because he wanted them to know he was untouchable. He sent coded ciphers because he wanted people to work to understand him. In many ways, he got exactly what he wanted. More than 50 years later, we are still talking about him. His letters are studied by cryptographers. His ciphers are decoded by teams of international experts. His name is known by millions of people around the world. But here's the thing he did not count on. We remember his victims more. We remember David Faraday, who was on his very first date. We remember Betty Lou Jensen, who ran but couldn't run fast enough. We remember Darlene Ferrin, who left behind a daughter. We remember Cecilia Shepard, who died in a hospital 2 days after fighting to stay alive. We remember Paul Stein, who was just driving his cab home. They deserved justice. They never got it, and that is the real tragedy of this case. So tell me, do you think the Zodiac was ever identified? Arthur Leigh Allen? Gary Poste? Someone the world has never considered? Drop your theory in the comments. I want to know what you think. If this kind of deep dive true crime content is what you're here for, hit subscribe, because we go this deep on every single case. See you in the next one.